Kenya's biggest conversation gets into the fourth hour. Very good morning to you, wherever you are tuned in this morning. It's lovely day, Tuesday, the 17th day of August, 2021. City, today's proverb.
You cannot steal a head of a goat from the butcher and put it in a sack, for the horns will stick out.
You cannot steal a head of a goat from a butcher and put it in a sack, for the horns will stick out.
If you must steal, cut it in something else.
Jeez.
Not a sack.
If you must steal, don't steal the head.
Sack not useful. Better still, why bother with the head? There's a whole body.
Juicier parts of meat, no?
No. I see the direction you're taking this discussion. You're making me an advisory service for thieves.
Is that not what they say? If you're going to steal, at least,
Yeah, still have issues with this proverb. Somebody who understands livestock very well has joined us in the studio now, okay? And this is the MP for Laikipia North, Sarah Korere. Mheshimiwa, when you listen to this proverb, don't steal the head of a goat from a butcher, and if you steal it, don't put it in a sack because the horns will stick out. Is that a correct representation of what would happen?
Well, I also don't want to give an advisory to the thieves. Lest I be accused. Now that I come from a place where livestock is stolen for real.
For real.
Yeah.
And not just the head.
No, not just
the
the
live live goat stolen. Page 16 of the Standard today has a story. 4 security officers attached to Laikipia Nature Conservancy were injured in an attack at their camp on Saturday night. The officers were attacked by suspected bandits believed to be hiding in the vast conservancy. The bandits are said to be behind a series of livestock thefts in the region. During the 10 p.m. attack, one of the officers was shot in the cheek, while 2 others escaped with leg injuries. The 4th officer sustained chest injuries. 3 officers are recuperating at Sipili Maternity and Nursing Home, and 1 was referred to Nyahururu County Hospital for specialized treatment. These are cases that are just common. Every new day we are seeing something coming out of Laikipia in what is now being called, an attack by people who are being called bandits. It's either cattle rustlers, it's either community conflict, and all these things that are taking place there. What's happening in Laikipia?
Actually, what's happening in Laikipia, I can say have accelerated into kind of terrorism. Because I wouldn't want to believe it is a community conflict. As a matter of fact, there is no conflict between the communities, the indigenous communities of Laikipia. But in the recent in the last 3 months, we've seen a lot of mass movement of cattle from northern Kenya. That is parts of Isiolo North, Samburu East, and to the west from Tiati. That is Baringo. And there's been a lot of mayhem, forceful invasion of land, both the large and small-scale lands, the conservancies, the group ranches, the small agricultural holding, and not just land invasion. There's a lot of killings and stealing. And surprisingly enough, there's a lot of government officers have been killed in the last 3 months in Laikipia. So have the local communities. People have been killed every morning. In fact, I came from Laikipia yesterday, and something, really hurt me so bad. Because for the last 4 days I've been home, there's a theft every night. Okay. But last evening, some 4 girls were coming home from school. And just like a kilometer, almost 500 meters before home, there was some cattle grazing on their maize. And when the girls tried to raise alarm, the fellows who were looking after those cattle who were armed, gave them a thorough beating, actually. And when their parents tried to come and rescue them, they were shot at. At 3
p.m.
in the afternoon. And 4 girls were given a thorough beating by those herders. So to me, I don't think it is herder. I mean, it's terrorism.
So these herders are not from here?
They are not from Laikipia. They are not from Laikipia.
A number of things that you've mentioned. One is that movement of livestock from other counties coming into Laikipia, and then there's theft of livestock in Laikipia.
Yes.
Why are people coming from other counties into Laikipia? Is it in search of pasture, and what does it mean about pasture in Laikipia?
Well, I think the excuses they come in search of pasture, but I don't want to believe that is the real thing, because I'm born and bred in Laikipia, and for the last very many years I've never seen so huge a massive movement of livestock like I've seen in the last 6 years or so. Because traditionally, every county has their traditional reserves, during a drought. They're the lowlands, they're the forests, and it's interesting that now every livestock in Laikipia, I mean in Samburu, Baringo, and Isiolo, are moving into Laikipia. One, I want to believe there is a lot of political mobilization in the name of historical land injustices. And, well, I want to believe there is a lot of political mobilization and incitement, and that is what is happening in Laikipia.
Why would that be? Okay, if you're going to look at the resource that you're talking about, and specifically to land,
Yes.
and Laikipia is one of those counties in this country with huge tracts of land still available.
Yes.
Are you then saying there's a possibility that those who may have been edged out historically would be looking for an opportunity to come in present day and take it back?
I would want to not agree with that, because personally, I come from a community that feel that we were edged out, the indigenous Laikipia Maasai. And we live in the reserves of Mugogodo. And for the last many years, we've had a way of, having agreements on how to graze our land, our cattle in the ranches during drought. And we are doing it. So it's interesting because the pastoralists of Laikipia are not, causing any havoc. But the pastoralists from outside Laikipia are the ones creating all the havoc. And why I say there's a lot of political mobilization, it's because Laikipia did not start existing in the last 6 or so years. Laikipia has always been there with these big chunks of land. But again, when you look at it, if the only recipients of this violence were the big ranch owners, then we would say probably.
Okay.
But look at a woman who all what she has between her and her poverty is 2 acres of land. She grows some maize and beans, which is, what she used to sustain her family. And those cattle are feeding on those maize and beans. So, I mean, that's not a huge tract of land. So, well, as I said earlier, there is a politics of expansionism because of the creation of the new Laikipia North constituency, which luckily I'm the member of that constituency. Yeah.
Where was it carved from? Why would people be looking at that and seeing there's an opportunity to expand as well and bring in new populations into this constituency? What's the context and the history of that Laikipia North?
Well, the context and the history of Laikipia North constituency was hived from the former Laikipia East and Laikipia West. And formerly, Laikipia East and Laikipia West had split the pastoralist community into 2. The current, what we call Social ward now, was under Laikipia West, and the other 3, which is Mugogodo East, Mugogodo West, and Segera, were under Laikipia East. So the new Laikipia North constituency was hived specifically because I remember then I was one of the people who actually mobilized and went out to actually look for this constituency, because we thought as a small group we were being neglected by the leaderships then. Because Kenyans and ethnicity, politics of Kenyans and ethnicity, you cannot separate them. So we had a feeling like we were not part of the Laikipia we should be. And we thought it was a high time we also had a voice. But unfortunately, when this constituency was got, it actually became more of a curse than a blessing to the people of Laikipia. Because, I will tell you how. Because, not many people will understand that Maasai and Samburu are two different communities.
What's the difference?
Quite different.
What's the difference?
The difference is in even the culture. It's like if you ask me what's the difference between Kikuyu and Meru. I know there are two distinct communities, but
they're very distinct.
But from where I sit, I think they're
all same.
They're all same.
You see, the reason why I ask, if you say Kikuyu, I would rather you say Kikuyu probably and the people from Kirinyaga. Because linguistically, for instance,
Yes.
we're talking about differences.
Yes.
What are the differences?
Right.
Culture.
Yes.
What are the differences? Because for many people like myself who are fairly ignorant,
Yes.
we think they belong to the Ma community.
Yes.
Now, this is what I'd like you to explain.
Yes, even culturally, we've quite some distinct cultures, and even linguistically, we've got some disconnect here and there. And of course, there are geographically where we are located, because other than the Maasais in Narok and Kajiado, the only other group of Maasai you'll get is Laikipia Maasai. And Laikipia is not like the name of a county, it is the name of a sub-tribe of the Maasai. They're called the Laikipiak. And on the northern side, we have the Samburu, which is a very big community because they occupy the whole of Samburu County, parts of Laikipia, parts of Isiolo, and parts of Marsabit. And now the politics of expansionism is because the Laikipia Maasai are fairly a small,
few.
community, a small community, but only indigenous to Laikipia. Because you can't find them in Isiolo, you can't find them in Samburu, or Marsabit. They're only in Laikipia.
Right.
And our brothers, the other side of the world, that is Samburu and Isiolo, thought probably because they can mobilize their numbers from Samburu and Isiolo, then they felt like they should get that constituency to themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think then, based on what you've just said, because I thought to myself, how is it that like these herdsmen, for example, who clearly are so comfortable to come in and graze their cattle, and there's nobody necessarily pushing them out to the point whereby they can wield violence on inhabitants of that particular area, they're comfortable.
Yeah.
Could this be the reason why? If this expansionism that you're talking about, then clearly something in the minds of people who even practice a daily thing, that they feel, well, this is the move. And doing this is just one of those pegs that's fitting in the holes. Is that the case?
Actually, it is the case. And if you go back to the history of Laikipia, in 2004 to 2007, there was a lot of massacre in the western side of Laikipia. And a lot of families, had fled their land. And the people were, terrorizing them, settled on those pieces of land. So, it can be twofold. Number one, it's actually trying to instill fear so that the people can leave their lands and other people can settle there. And then secondly, then there is that angle of political mobilization and politics of expansionism. Yeah.
Now, from what you say, it appears that they seem to be carrying on this activity without any hindrance. It's not as though it's like they're marching forward and they just have people waving at them and ushering them onwards. There's no one more or less stopping and asking, excuse me, where do you think you're going and what are you doing?
Yes, I can also answer that.
Yes.
Because in 2017, actually 2016, it just started slowly like it started now.
Yes.
And by the time we were going to the polls in 2017, it was so bad.
Yes.
And at some stage, the president called on an operation by KDF because the police were literally overpowered by those people.
Yep.
And there was a very merciless, if I may say, operation that was carried out in Laikipia in 2017. And then after that, things were quiet for the last 4 years until a few months ago. And I don't want to say nobody is stopping them because as even when you are reading that Standard newspaper, the administration in Laikipia has tried to. But you know, the people who are coming, and that's why I say this is not pastoralism, it's terrorism. You know, when the security forces try to stop them, they kill them. We've lost so many soldiers in the process.
You know, Mheshimiwa, why I asked the question, I'm looking at a broader picture here. Historically and even in the recent past.
Yes.
What started off and what was referred to as tribal clashes in this country
Yes.
began in that same way, and it was labeled as tribal clashes.
Yes.
Now, I happen to come from a place that borders Nandi. Okay, it's called Muhoroni.
All right.
Okay. Now, the interesting thing about all these clashes and the aftermath is when you talk to your neighbors across in Nandi, many of them had also been attacked.
Yes.
So they didn't know who these people were. But ostensibly, the impression that was being given are these people, the Nandis, are attacking the Luos on this side. And that actually was not the case. Now, why do I bring in this? Again, there was talk about people instigating it. There's been problem in Marsabit for the longest time. And also, like your area, it seems to peak as we're nearing an election.
Yes.
So you wonder, is it that the current leadership thinks that they might not get back, or somebody else wants to take it? Meaning, whatever political power they seem to want, they want to get it through what you're calling terrorism.
Yes.
Now, why do I bring in the administration? The people behind these things are known.
True.
They are not. They don't come into the country on the day of the attack and then disappear. They live here. They are known, and even the things they do, they are known. And that's why I asked the question: why is no one stopping them? Because in this country, it is not possible for you to pull such a stunt, and the intelligence and security do not know. They do know.
And maybe even greater than that, Mheshimiwa, is that then why are they being left to continue? So it's as though we expect these attacks will happen, and then, you know, it dies down after some time. Like the way you've narrated the story to us today.
Yes.
That has happened. People in the area have seen that it has happened. It all quietens down by evening. But at the same time, security forces not doing anything, it's almost expected that it would happen, and then the noise would die down after some time, and then we go along our merry way. It seems a bit odd that there's no stepping in or, you know, overhauling of the situation, but it's almost expected that it would happen.
You know, to be quite frank with you, I think I am as frustrated as everybody else is, because naturally I would expect that the security apparatus, you know, have all what it takes to stop this.
They do.
And as you say, it's not like these people are not known.
No.
They are known. And as you rightfully observe, in most pastoral communities, a lot of people believe in thriving well under conflict. And I can say without fear of contradiction, a lot of pastoralist leaders are, sorry to say, but more or less it's like that.
They're warmongers.
They are warmongers.
Or even warlords.
And even warlords. So from where I sit, you know, being the first woman to be elected, I'm from a pastoralist community, from a very small community. You know, I know nothing about the militias. And I, by God's grace, I got elected in that very hot area under very hot circumstances.
Yeah.
And if I can tell you, I also went through hell because 4 days to the election, I lost all my livestock. All. Right? And
Stolen one night.
Stolen one night, and I even lost a cousin, you know, was
Ole.
killed during the... and, you know, I was now torn between, do I put my resources in finishing my last leg of the campaign,
Yeah.
or I put the resources in following the
In
livestock,
recovering.
you
Yes.
know, that I've lost. You know, losing like 100 cattle in one night, that is almost 10 million.
That's a lot.
Right?
It's a
That's
lot.
a lot. And... you know, that was a way of telling me that you should quit, or this, you know...
It was a message.
It was a message that you are overstepping your mandate, and luckily. And from then to date, I think I've lost more animals, you know. And from where I sit, I know nothing about militias or how to get one to protect me. the government is supposedly supposed to protect me is nowhere to be seen. And not just me, even the people I lead. It is so frustrating when a woman calls you to say, my children have been beaten up by some, bandits purporting to be pastoralists. Somebody calls me to say, the only 7 cows I had, were taken last night.
Yeah.
And then, those are the kind of calls I get every morning.
Which what puzzles me and disturbs me is that you say these people are armed.
Yes.
Does the law allow pastoralists to be armed?
Well,
Because I didn't hear any sort of bows and arrows. No, it's
Guns.
Guns.
let me tell you, they are not just guns. Even some of them have got more sophisticated guns than our police force. And, according to law, guns can only be, held by our security forces or people who are licensed by the same government to carry firearms. So anything else outside there is illegal. And sometimes back in 2017, we thought, well, now because the response by the security forces is very poor when we are having these attacks, we had a discussion with the internal ministry then, and we thought the best thing was to provide what we call the NPR, the National Police Reservists. Now that the communities living in Laikipia do not have those illegal arms. And truly they did it. They armed some people. We took them through training. They were armed. They were equipped. And for quite some time, that kind of madness went down, because the national police reservists are more, they respond more efficiently than
they are
our
community.
police, because they are community. And in the year early 2019, I don't know who sat where in Nairobi and thought, well, this arming the NPR was a very bad idea, and they decided to take away all the firearms that they give to the police reservice. I can tell you, the day they asked them to take the firearms, while they were surrendering the firearms at Rumuruti, the bandits were terrorizing their homes. Same day. So the government disarms,
Its own partners in
its
security.
own partners in security, and they do not have the capacity or the willingness to disarm the bandits. So, you leave the community at the mercies of the very ruthless militia.
It sounds like it's a very well orchestrated, very well organized scheme with very serious players in our national government, right?
Yeah.
Because just like you said, in 2017, there were all these operations. The KDF is ordered in, go in and mop up all the illegal firearms, conduct a ruthless operation. Nobody's taken to court. Nobody's prosecuted for whatever has happened.
Nobody's
It
arrested.
dies down, and an MP is arrested here and there. Sarah Korere's predecessor was arrested, released,
Called for questioning, released.
brought into DCI, tough talking, and then dies down. We are back there, and this is not just in Laikipia; it's in all these other hotspots. So you ask yourself, who is benefiting from this? And maybe you have some insights. Kenya's biggest conversation, it continues. We are having a conversation with Sarah Korere, the MP for Laikipia North. What's happening in Laikipia? All these incidences of violence. Ordinary citizens, young children, women, men killed, police officers, security agents killed. Why should we be seeing this? In the Situation Room is Eric Latif, CT Muga Nduoko, and Sarah Korere, the MP for Laikipia North constituency. What's happening in Laikipia? Not just in Laikipia. So those counties there, Baringo, Isiolo, Samburu, Laikipia, and Marsabit as well, we keep having issues of violence. And not just violence, but deadly armed conflict.
Tana River had the same, but
Yep.
it has died down quite a bit. The areas of Pokot, you hear in Marakwet,
Yes,
you hear of
Marakwet
such
and-
issues.
Yep.
Around the Elgon area, we also used to hear of such issues, but they've died down. There's a historical perspective to this that I think it would be wise to pay heed to. When Yugoslavia disintegrated, and Slovenia and all the other countries came up, there were people who were doing precisely this. But on large scale, they were not stealing cattle, they were killing people. exterminating people. And I think the notion of impunity lends itself to this way of thinking that nothing will happen to you. Oh, that's not true. That's not true. Something will happen. And usually it's when you least expect it and is you least want it. But if you look at the political push, forget even the economic one. Leaders wanting to exert and to hold on to power by whatever means. And then doing what they do. You see, what I think many of them don't seem to understand is this same thing can actually reverse onto you. You see, you start off a cycle of violence and there's no telling where it will end.
Sure.
Is this, though, perpetuated and perpetrated by people just looking to score some certain political scores in terms of even getting voters and all?
Yes.
Or is it thugs who are looking to steal and make money?
Thugs are
They
the
use politics to protect themselves.
Thugs
I
are
think
the,
it's the other way around.
thugs are the vehicles.
I think it's the other way around. I think thugs, people who are determined, that's how they're going to
Go about
create
their
wealth.
business.
Yes. And then they go into politics to protect themselves. You know, you arrest me today, there'll be a lot of
that's
hue and
the
cry,
angle.
and
So-
then you
so
will release
essentially
me.
the thug is the politician.
Yeah, the thug is now going to seek a-
look at it like this. Actually, the thugs are the agents, but the main force behind the thugs are the politicians. And why I say so, it's because there was a survey that was done, and in Laikipia North, for example, they came up with a finding that 49% of people have never been to school, as in they have not got any kind of education. 49%. And then in Tiati, which is just my neighbors next door, it is 75%, right?
Yep.
And then,
So
you
that
know,
have not gone to school,
I've not gone to school.
even passing by it on Sunday.
Even, you know, I think they just saw, you know, it passing by. But by the way, they have not seen anywhere because there are no schools, and I can tell you why. Then, of course, when you go up north, I think the statistics now are higher. And you see some of these places, they have been leaders forever.
Yep.
And you wonder, what have they been advocating for if they cannot advocate for the
Education.
education of their communities? Then, to me, what I think, because when I was first elected as the MP for Laikipia North, I inherited 2 locations with a population of not less than 4,000 without a single public institution. No nursery school, no dispensary, no nothing. And we are talking about the
No
free
chief's office.
Now, that is the most interesting thing. There is a chief, of course, who does not have an office. The office is Manyata. The same government that employs a chief and several assistant chiefs in the same location where there is no school. And at the sub-county headquarters, the education officers who do not know that there is a location that exists without a school. Now, my brother, tell me. You know, for those boys and girls who are growing up in those bushes, of course, the girls will be married off. They'll be, you know, somebody's fourth or
by the
fifth
time
wife
they're 10
at the
years
age of 12 or
Yes, yes,
10.
yes.
And of course, the boys will be the bandits in making.
Yep.
And when I first got elected into Laikipia North, I've built 13 schools in those 2 locations. And they have an enrollment of not less than 1,000 collectively. And you know, to me, those are 1,000 bandits in making
Yep.
in the next 10 years.
Yep, and young wives.
Exactly, and young wives, okay? And when you look at things like maternal death,
But those are not young wives, those are child wives.
those are child wives. And you know, in this country, the constitution says primary education is basic primary
basic
education
right.
It's a right.
is a right, and it is free and compulsory.
Yeah.
Meaning that it is free, you should take your child to school, and if you don't take them, somebody should enforce you to take that child to school. So with that constitution in place, with those children having those basic rights, there are no schools. How do you take a child to a school that does not
Non-existent.
exist? Right? So number one, the very government that you are looking up to, you know, to safeguard the rights of those children
Yep.
is actually abusing their rights and denying them their basic rights. So to me, I think the leadership of these pastoral communities has failed in a very big way, because failing to provide them with education and failing to plan is actually planning to fail, and we are failing miserably.
How many constituencies are there in Laikipia?
There are 3.
What's the population?
It's
Total.
about total population of Laikipia, slightly above 500,000.
And a vast
Landmass.
Oh, no, it's vast.
landmass.
And the Laikipia North constituency is bigger,
Geographically.
geographically, collectively than West and East combined.
And you are in North.
Yes, I'm in North.
That's what I was saying, thugs. You see, this person who's coming in to become a political leader, they're not coming to lead their people. They are coming to use their position to continue enriching themselves using the local resource, which is
actually,
the young boys and girls and their livestock.
Eric, you have a valid point. You pause for a second. They were already leaders.
Yes.
There were people who were looked up to for whatever reason, and there were people who may have appeared to have resources for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But if the culture Mheshimiwa has just described here is a culture in which they grew up in, then they know all the thugs.
Sure, but then it's also being used to their advantage, because they realize that that is the position. If you have a place that doesn't have a school, for example, and you know that these young boys will
That's
become
breeding- that's
bandits,
breeding
and
ground
you know
for
that these
resources.
young girls will become child wives, then you know very well that I can come into this area because the resources are already available.
There's a time when he had a conversation on the phone with the MP for Tiati, William Kamket, remember? And it's the same things that he was telling us. You go 200, 300 kilometers, you have not even seen a road. Watch a tarmac road.
A road.
Road in an area. There are no schools. There are no chief's offices. All these things are not there in an area. And then the government is just standing here in Nairobi and a CS is saying, you know, we are going to crack down hard
Right.
on this. And you're not addressing those basics.
Crack what?
It just means that you are sitting here, you know exactly what the problem is because you must have been told over and over and over again. When KDF goes to an area, they also come back with a report.
Right.
Intelligence, they tell you, okay, so the problem, the challenges here include this, and the other. Some of the people who've led security operations, even from KDF in these areas, have even risen to become MPs and ministers for interior.
They have.
True.
And here we are,
Yeah.
so many years down the road. So, where is the problem?
Actually, impunity is one issue, and the other one is, championing status quo. Like, I think to those people sitting in Nairobi, the more ignorant you remain, the better. For whatever reasons I don't understand. And also for the leadership, it's like they are better off when their people remain the way they are. Because I would fail to understand why somebody will be leading a constituency, or if you are an MCA, a ward where there is no nursery school, then I don't quite get what you say when you sit in that assembly. And who do you represent anyway? So to me, I think one thing, the kind of conflict we see among the pastoralists will be addressed largely and in the long last if these people were provided with opportunities to go to school, and if they were provided with the basic amenities. Because, for example, now, initially these pastoralists don't settle, because you can live here for 2 months, then the next month you are moving. But if they have a school and their children are in school, that is one way of enticing them to settle.
Yep.
Right? When you are talking about the universal health care and the free maternal services, and women are still dying during childbirth, because there is no dispensaries. There is nowhere to take them anyway for safe delivery. Then what are we telling those people? Do they even get the concept of what we are talking about, universal health care? And thirdly, pastoralism, is just like coffee growing. Coffee is a cash crop in this country, and so is Mira. And I think beef industry is also another cash crop, if only it will be tapped into. It's very lucrative, and infrastructure provided for the pastoralists to keep their animals as a profitable way of life. But you see, because of the players, the actors, the people who benefit from these proceeds of cattle rustling, nobody is keen to do that, right? So these guys are just hovering around the globe with their cattle. There is no structured way of keeping their cattle. When we talk about the resource-based conflict, you cannot have all the cattle moving from Isiolo and Samburu and Baringo into Laikipia, because then if we allow that within no time, it will deplete all the resources, because Isiolo and Laikipia and Samburu is equally depleted.
Right.
So unless now we start another conversation about rehabilitating our rangelands, then very soon this resource-based conflict,
that industry, so that
exactly,
because we do this with wildlife, and
Yes.
this number of wildlife
Yes.
are sustainable in this level of ecosystem, in this acreage.
Yes.
Same. So you have cattle, but you understand at this point in time, this is what we do with the cattle. In fact, the question has been asked: why do people have to come to KMC? Why don't you build an abattoir in that region? After all, that's
Thank
where
you.
the cows are.
Thank you.
Why do you have to walk? Well, you don't really literally walk your cows all the way to Nairobi.
Transport them to
Where
Nairobi.
for a long there are many who walk their
There are
cows
many
and their
who
camels.
walk, yeah.
Through all these places.
But actually, that's why I was saying there are so many players who are the beneficiaries of that kind of industry that is not structured.
Yep.
Because you find a trader in Nairobi goes to Laikipia on a market day, buys a cow for 30,000, and by the time he's slaughtering that cow a day earlier, after that in Dagoretti, is selling that cow for 60,000. Just one difference is one day. So
Just
between
double it.
Laikipia and Dagoretti, you've not added any value to that cow.
Nope.
The cow hasn't grown more.
The cow have not grown more tails or
Just put it
horns,
on a truck.
right?
More kilos.
Of course. So you'll be pushing those guys out of business. And these are not just small people like you and me. These are
They're not just buying one cow.
Big names, the who is who of this country.
Washimoa, you've been an MP 2 terms now. The first time you are nominated, now you've been elected.
Yeah.
Have you raised this issue in the National Assembly? If we went to the Hansard,
Yes.
can we find statements by Sarah Korere saying this is happening and this is a solution?
Actually, yes. If you can go to the Hansard, I've raised it through motions, through statements, through petitions. Even I think on Thursday, I'm tabling another statement to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior. Actually, after I raised a question in Parliament about a month ago, Matiang'i himself came to Laikipia, as a follow-up. And, after issuing very tough warnings and tough talk, and a day after, a person was killed in Laikipia. Then 2 days after that, 3 officers were killed. 3 officers, government officers. And to date, they're still talking tough,
Yeah.
but nothing is happening.
So the theory that talk doesn't actually work then can be proved true here.
Especially when the intention is to talk
to do
and
anything.
not work.
Yes.
What is the best, from where you sit as a leader of the community, what would be the best way to address this in the short term, in the medium term? You've told us the long term is empower the community,
Yes.
bring in all those services and have them there. Today, what would be the solution that would make sure that guns are silenced in the area?
Today what will make the guns silent in Laikipia? There is no shortcut. The government should mop up the illegal firearms, and catch the fellows, the owners of those guns, either dead or alive. Because I don't know how they are going to
surrender.
disarm, guys who are armed. But they should do what it takes. First, to make sure that the guns are silent, that the guns, the illegal guns that are in the hands of the criminals are mopped up by government. Then after that, all other things can be put into place, like dialogue, like, having dialogue between the concerned counties like Laikipia, Baringo, Isiolo, and Samburu. But we cannot have dialogue when the guns are,
They're still active. out there.
active, yeah.
How about arresting those perpetrators?
That is
Because
it.
we'll arrest, arresting a young man, like you've said, a young man who grew up knowing this is the way of life, a young man who's earning a living by carrying this firearm and stealing cattle and bringing it back and get earning a living is one. But then there's a leadership of this. There are people who there's those who are sitting in air-conditioned rooms making millions of shillings. How do we deal with
But
those?
Eric, consider, the question you've asked is an extremely pertinent one, but consider the attitude that those who've been in power have had. Start with the northeastern province, as it was then, I'm calling it what it was. Neglected. It's like they might as well be in another solar system altogether. The area that Mheshimiwa comes from, it's the same attitude. So now, changing that, it's like when something happens, it's like, oh, okay, it has happened to them. It's not given priority. It's as though they are not even Kenyans. I remember being asked once when I was in Pokomo land by a cattle herder from a community called the Wardei. He asked me, habari ya Kenya. You cannot imagine my shock. I was in Kenya and this is somebody asking me. And he was asking it sincerely because Kenya to them is this other place other than where they are.
Yep.
And I'm sure where Mheshimiwa comes from, Kenya is also this other place other than where they are. So how do we get these people to be like other Kenyans?
Actually, that is what I was talking about. Number one, for you to have these people behave, like other Kenyans, make them feel like they are part of Kenya.
Yeah.
Because when you come to some of these places we come from, the road network is, it's almost not there.
Right.
And even in a county like Laikipia, where, if you sit from Nairobi, people will look Laikipia in the eyes of Nanyuki and Nyahururu. But forget that,
There's this other part of it.
3/4 of Laikipia. I remember when there was this, what do you call it, equalization fund was introduced in Parliament. Laikipia was, locked out of it because nobody thought, because those people who are planning in Nairobi, Laikipia is Nyahururu and Nanyuki and, the rest of Laikipia didn't feature. And it took me a very, a lot of lobbying to make sure that parts of Laikipia North and parts of Laikipia West were actually included in equalization. If you come to Laikipia today, the tarmac road starts from Nairobi all the way to Nanyuki, and it will end where Laikipia North starts. And then when you connect Laikipia North to Rumuruti, the tarmac road starts from Nyahururu all the way to Rumuruti, and it ends where Laikipia North starts. Personally, sometimes I'm ashamed when I speak about these things because I've pushed it in Parliament. I even make sure that we factored it in the budget. Okay. And then, when delegations visit the State House and visit the ministers and people are going to ask for this tarmac road, some tarmac road that leads to their animal farms. And of course, there is no budget. We budget in this country.
Yeah.
And once the budget is done, it is done.
Yep.
And when you start giving, things pegged on who have more votes.
Yep.
If a delegation comes from Kisii, for example, or Nyeri, then you are told the road that we budgeted for Laikipia has been moved.
It has been moved to Kisii.
And then, surprisingly, I have a road that has been advertised on record 3 times on national newspaper, tender awarded, and then you are told there is no funding. Simply because it goes to North, not Kenya, my friend. It is so sad. And I think much as we are seeing a lot of mayhem in this northern part of this country, I think failure by the government to do what they have to do to the citizens of these places is a major contributory factor.
Your role as a parliamentarian includes also lobbying, like you're saying.
Yes.
Have you lobbied, the other members of parliament from the other 2 constituencies, that come from those visible, nice areas of Laikipia,
Right.
and also the other members of Laikipia County who are wealthy, the big ranch owners? If those people sat and spoke,
enough is enough.
yes. Have you reached out to them?
I can comfortably say for the last 4 years that I've been an elected member of that parliament, a lot of things have changed. Because for the first time, we even have a tarmac road ongoing. As I mentioned earlier, we have 13 schools in locations that had no schools.
Yeah.
Of course, it is not. It's not my effort alone. It's in partnership with everybody else, including my colleagues and the investors in Laikipia. and a lot of people of goodwill. There are a lot of people of goodwill in this country. So I believe with the right attitude and with the right focus, the things can be changed.
We've seen, even most recently with other things in this country, that, the more noise you make and the more agitated you seem to be, especially on the other side of government, I'm going to call that from, citizen side, that, things can move. The more noise that's made, the more visible noise that's made, things can move. Is there still some strength that you have, Mheshimiwa, to say that you can continue?
I can tell you for free, it's not the amount of noise you make, it is the amount of votes you can bring to the table. I can tell you that for free. If you look at it today, the tribal mobilization that is going up in this country, that this region is mobilizing versus this region, and this region is mobilizing in this region. And for the small communities of this country, where do we get ourselves in?
BBI.
I'm sorry.
In fact,
That's what we were told.
In fact, I was going to say,
national panacea.
you have a county government.
Yes. But again, within the county government, as I mentioned earlier, Laikipia constitutes 3 constituencies. Laikipia North, where I come from, has got 46,000 registered voters as at last general election. Laikipia West have got 120,000 registered voters. Laikipia East have got about 90,000, about 90 plus registered voters.
You're the junior sibling.
So I am the junior sibling.
It's about the
of
numbers.
course, the same marginalization that was, done at the national level has been
It comes
devolved.
Yes.
Have been devolved to the county governments, because every governor will say, okay, so if I put this much into this, what is the
will I have
returns?
left?
And unless we have people who will, politicians who will serve people for based on what they need. Sometimes, I use the Nanyuki Thika Road when I go to Laikipia, and the dual carriage from Maragua all the way to Nyeri is going all the way. Personally, I have no problem with that because I'm a user of that road. But honestly, when we have
let it keep going.
When you have no tarmac at
when
all.
we have no tarmac at all in Laikipia North, and I know because I sit in that I sit in that parliament and I sit in the budget committee. I know the budget for Doldol and Nanyuki Road has been there since 2003.
Every year.
This one that just came up the other day is being implemented so fast. So I can assure you, my sister, it's not about the kind of noise you can make. It is about what you can bring on the table.
The nature of our politics. Speak now to Kenyans who do not know much about what's happening in Laikipia North. Just create that aware. What would you like to tell Kenyans? What kind of rallying and support would you like?
Well, what I would want to tell Kenyans is, number one, tribal animosity in this country will not take anybody anywhere. And as a leader, you would rather be out of office if the only thing that can keep you in that office is violence. So I also want to, to plead to the security apparatus that they should not leave the people of Laikipia under the mercies of the armed terrorists, because I think it's our constitutional right to be protected by the government of Kenya. So what I want to ask, especially the people of Laikipia who are listening to me today, is that as a leadership, we are not giving up on looking for short and long-term solutions to their security problems. But I also want to urge my colleagues and my counterparts and the leadership of the 3 counties involved that it is the high time, they do what is right. They lead their people in the right direction, because one thing I know, actually 50% of the livestock that is terrorizing Laikipia belong to the who is who of Samburu and Isiolo. Politicians, government officers. In fact, the other day, some livestock were confiscated in a certain farm, and a very senior person who sits in government called. to say release the
release the
animals.
animals.
Because
Then
mine are involved.
Yes. So, it's so sad and
It is
it's
sad.
shameful that the people of Laikipia must suffer for
the
other
hands of
people
others.
in the hands of others.
Sarah Korere, MP Laikipia North, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.